Good evening. Welcome to the West Shore Photography Club. This is our normal Monday evening session. And tonight we have an image review, a competition with Bryson Leidich. And I'll tell you more about that in just a minute, what the difference is between a competition versus a review. But before we do that, I'd like to call on Eve Smith and Mary Fox to give us an update on the trip that you had on Saturday to Harrisburg. Eve, you want to start?
Sure. We had 22 people. We met on State Street, walked up 2nd, up to about Market Street, found a bazillion things to photograph, got a little windy for a bit. We made our way up to the train station, went inside there a bit, warmed up, came out. It wasn't near as windy, which was nice, and zigzagged through alleyways. I think it was great. Sun was in and out, so your lighting was a little different. Sometimes you had shadows, sometimes you didn't. But
the Oscars just became so political. Every movie needs to be more woke than the
Excuse me, I'm going to mute everybody. And if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that, but I'm going to mute everybody right now. And that means, Bryson, you will have to unmute yourself, and Eve, you will too.
gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. I think I'm unmuted. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mary, you can put your input in.
Yeah, you covered pretty much all of it, Eve. I just think the wind blew us all down 2nd Street until we decided to turn onto Market. Then we saved our lives, I think. And yeah, we did have a lot of fun. Everybody seemed to stop at different places. And so you lost people along the way. Then you saw them again, and then you lost them again. But it was all fun. It was a beautiful day, and it was nice to see everybody show up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. It was for you leading that trip too. And the 22 people on a really cold day with blowing and cold, and it's remarkable. This Saturday, we have a trip to Anderson Mill. And if you haven't been to Anderson Mill, this is one you really might want to consider. Or if you have been there, every time you go, you'll find things to photograph. The Anderson Mill is about an hour and 15, 20 minutes from Mechanicsburg. It's down 81, down south near Gettysburg area. And it is an old mill with 3 floors plus a basement. And you could have 50, we had 40 people there once. And at that mill, you can not get in way of people's way. It's so big and large with lots of really, really cool things in there. And a matter of fact, at that first trip we took with the 40 people, Dick Mesner was our traffic cop. We actually had cones up. We had so many people, we had to direct them into a parking area so that they would, so it's very, very popular. This would be our 3rd trip. So you might want to consider that. It's 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. A $10 donation goes to Harry Anderson, an elderly gentleman who maintains the mill. He told us we're going to be mad at him because he put some new windows in and he didn't put in the old style windows, which they were just beautiful, but whatever. So next Monday night, we have an urban photography night. Jürgen Lebert from Boston leads a lot of night photography sessions. This one is not Milky Way. This is not the Northern Lights where you have to take a flight to. This is urban, and this is going to be about what you can do in the Harrisburg area and our local area for night photography. It's a very good session. I've attended it. And so he's going to be here next Monday night. And then on the 13th, we're going to have a follow-on to that in Harrisburg, where Karen Cummings is going to take us, and we're going to be photographing the bridges at night in Harrisburg. So that'd be a really nice follow-on practice session to that. And then coming up, we have quite a few trips coming up. Kiwanis Lake for egrets, Anvil Photo Walk. We're going to have a waterfall training class, and then 2 waterfall training trips. We're going to have a murals photo walk in Harrisburg, and we're going to be going to Hershey Gardens. So we have a lot of things coming up, and you'll be hearing more about that as time goes on. So tonight we have a competition. A competition is different from an image review. An image review is and thoughts and how is this received by the audience and that kind of a thing. A competition is where you put in your very best work and you get points, and that's what we'll have. You'll get a scale from 1 to 10 tonight. It is 1 to 10, right, Bryson?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and so that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And Bryson Leidich, who just spoke, is a professional photographer in the Harrisburg area. And Bryson has done many of our competitions for us and has a keen eye, and it will tell you like it is, so to speak. And before we get started, Bryson, I'd like to ask if you could tell people a little bit about you. We have a lot of new members and they may not know you, and some of the things you do as a professional photographer.
Well, the first thing I did recently was retire. But as a working photographer, but I spent over 50 years doing a variety of photography. I started out doing public relations photography and press photography. I worked for Associated Press and UPI, and I worked up at the Capitol for years doing news photography for television. And that was not really as interesting to me. I really found the concept of the studio interesting to begin with, and then later architecture. So over the years, I've worked in almost any different area of photography that you can think of. During the late 70s and 80s, I did a lot of product work for AMP, which is electronics, and that's now Tyco. So I did a lot of macro photography. I mean, most of my subjects were about the size of your thumbnail. So I had a lot of experience in that. And then, of course, with lighting, because you started with nothing and created a picture on a set and you had to light it and all that stuff. So that was its own challenge. Later, I decided to move into architecture, which was always kind of a dream. My first, quote, job interview as a photographer was with one of the best architectural photographers in the country. And we actually went up to New York and shot in the World Trade Center, which was fascinating. It had just opened at that point. And that was my introduction to the view camera and architectural photography and all of the things that go along with that. And that became a goal for me, which I eventually managed to work myself into. And that for the last 20, 25 years of my my career was one of my primary focuses. That, and then I also did a whole lot of executive portraiture. And that was more or less out of just need more than anything else, because if you're dealing with corporate clients, why somewhere along the line, they're going to want you to photograph their people as well as their building and their product. So I had quite a diverse line of work that I had to do. That was a good thing, because that diversity it's a challenge, kept me alive. The other thing that kept me alive was Photoshop, because I really considered at one point burning out and finding something else to do with my life. And one of the things that bothered me about photography was not having enough control over my own images. I'd do something and then it would have to get sent off to a retoucher, like a product work would go off to somebody who would do retouching. And I always found that kind of disappointing, because I wanted to be able to create the pictures and make them look like I wanted them to look, like give source material to somebody else. And Photoshop sort of reinvigorated my excitement and gave me something to do. So that also put creativity into my hands. And that's what I've been doing for a little over the last 25 years, is working in digital imaging and Photoshop. So I used to teach at Penn State. I taught at Hack. I've spoken to professional groups in Pennsylvania, Florida, and I was a platform speaker for a national convention for the Professional Photographers of America. And my primary thrust right now is my personal work, but I also do fine art printing, and I do Zoom classes with people, and I do image reviews, and I teach them Lightroom and Photoshop and how to improve their photography. I've got students right now in Texas and Colorado, Indiana, and South Carolina. And I've got a few open spots if you're interested. So you just have to get in touch with me about that. So I've been doing competitions and reviews for the camera clubs for quite a long time. It's always one of my fun things to do. I always appreciate it. I do have to say this. I will say this to Joe, and as he's the guy in charge tonight, you guys have created a wonderful club, and I really need to commend you on what you've done and the people that you've brought in and the excitement and stuff that you managed to do, because what I'm seeing as a result of that is some darn good photography, and that's a good thing. That's something to be proud of. So, pat yourself on, reach around there and pat yourself on the back, Joe. That's you're
Well,
doing.
Bryson, those are very nice compliments, but I have to tell you, that is a result of the club itself, not just a couple of people. We have a lot of members that are very active in promoting the club and teaching and mentoring. It's a group effort. So thank you very much. We appreciate that very
I
much.
appreciate that group effort. Yes.
Okay.
So does my dragon.
Okay.
So are we ready to
We're ready. Yep.
burn down the house here and see what happens?
Okay.
All right. When I judge.
Perfect. We can see that just perfect.
You got it?
Yeah, we got it.
Good. When I judge, I like the 1 to 10. For the most part, I guess. I've explained this before to people. I think in terms of the way the PP of A would judge, and that is that if you get an 8 or above, you've done a really, really good job of taking a photograph. You start with a 10, and then you start losing points if you haven't done something perfect. And perfect is hard to come by. That being said, I actually have a couple of 10s tonight. So that speaks a lot to, like I said, the fact that you people are creating some really, really nice images. So I also think that it's important that you hear why you didn't get a 10 and what you might have done that would make the image a little bit better. Self-criticism is difficult, but it is something you can teach yourself, and you have the awareness of certain aspects of your imagery is something that you just build an awareness of over time, but you have to do it with dedication. You have to do it, kind of make that a primary function of your existence, if you will, in order to really get somewhere. Because it's like, I always compare it to learning a language. If you can learn a phrase or something this week and another one next week, and a month from now, you're not going to remember either one of them. But if you learn something a little bit every day, or at least a couple of times a week, and you really dedicate yourself to it, why the learning enhances itself. And then over time, it just builds and builds until you see more and you understand more, and it just gets better. So let's move into the images, okay? First one is called Restful. I understand the capture here. I see the draw. I appreciate the image. I think it's done pretty well. Joe, do you want me to give the scores as we do it, or you want me to go back at the end and give the scores in a?
I think if you give the scores as you go along, Bryson.
Okay, fine. All right. Well, I gave this an 8. There's a couple of things that I think need to be paid attention to. When you see an image like this, you photograph it because, oh, wow. And then the next thing you need to do once you get it into your computer is say, all right, what do I keep? What do I lose? And what do I change in order to make this have either more impact or more interest or whatever? The things that I notice about this are, first of all, there's very slight evidence of some sharpening halos. It's very, very easy to get those. You have to be careful when you're processing not to over sharpen. And sharpening is something that if you get all the way into Photoshop, sharpening should be done in stages. It should be done in at least 3 different stages. The first is capture sharpening, and that's done when you process your raw file. And that if you're, I guess most people are working in Lightroom. And the thing you have to be careful of is to not to overdo it, because if you overdo it, you get these little white lines where the blacks and the whites come together. And you see that here, and you see that where you have the edges that show up. It doesn't show up too much in broader areas or anything like this, but you can see it along the edges here, and you have to be careful of that. You want to be subtle with your capture sharpening. And then there's additional sharpening can be done to the image, either locally or as an overall thing, as a secondary influence to the image. And then there's output sharpening. Output sharpening is what do I want the final JPEG to look like that I'm sending to someone, or what the print is going to look like. And those actually require different settings. They're not, you can't just go boom and sharpen something. You have to do it a little bit differently for each one. So that's something you should keep in mind. As far as this image is concerned, I think I would want to crop. You got too much information here on the bottom. You got a wonderful subject here, and then you have this secondary information that you don't really need. I think you want to simplify your image. So if I take this dark mark here where the water line is, and I go over straight across, I pick up just a little bit of the beach here, which I think is sufficient, and it plays off against this above it, and it plays off as a contrast to this primary subject over here, and that's enough. The rest of this to me is just additional stuff that you don't need, and that simplification always makes your image a little stronger. And that's something you should look for. How much can I get rid of in this picture and still tell the story I want to tell, and have it maybe perhaps have greater impact than it does at the moment? The only other thing is exposure is a conversation we're going to have all the way through this evening. And in this case, this is pretty good. You've got good exposure, good for highlights, etc. I would there's a little bit of detail starting to sneak into the shadows over here, and I like that. I would like to see that along this edge. It's just barely starting to show up, but with the light, the sunset light coming across here, I would work to enhance that a little bit if you could, just to put a little bit more information in there, which I think would enhance that detail and make the image a little stronger. But it's a good image. I gave it an 8, which is a good score. So congratulations to the maker. Do we ask the
Yes.
maker now?
Yes, could we ask the maker to give a comment on that, please?
Bryson, this is Dick Messner. I thank you very much for your comments. On the print that I have, I did not see the haloing, but maybe when I made the JPEG, it jumped in there.
Very possible.
One of the reasons I left the sand in the bottom corner is to show me the footsteps that I made on the beach as I walked up around. So that was important to me, but it might not make for a fine art print. I recognize that. A comment, this is in Northwest Washington State. At low tide, which this is not, you can catch the sun coming through that hole in the rocks.
Oh,
I
wow.
have seen that photograph taken, and it's very impressive.
Wow. It's a very nice photograph, Dick. Yes, the one thing you need to ask yourself when you're showing pictures to someone else is, what's going to mean something to the viewer as opposed to what's going to mean something for me. So what you're going to put in your personal album and what you're going to show to the public sometimes are different. Sometimes the whole photograph is personal and the public don't really care. But with something like this, then you have that thought process going between, you know, what do I show everybody and what do I show myself? But it's good photograph. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next, we have Moonset at Turkey Point. This is a little flat. I would like to see more contrast in this image. I think that, well, I did copy it and put it into Photoshop, and I took some of these dark areas. Well, I just darkened the whole thing and using levels, very, very quick and simple fix, just to add some contrast and some bottom end to this, because it's just a little bit flat, a little bit open, more, I think, than it needs to be in order to make the scene feel the way that I think you really should have it. I think there's too much top here. I would crop off some of this and make this a stronger horizontal. And photographing the moon is really not that hard. And I think I would like to see that moon be a little bit more detailed. Now, I don't know, this looks to me like it's either a very long telephoto shot or it's composited in. I'm just going to believe it's a long telephoto shot. But this could have a little bit, there's almost a hint there of some information in the moon. And I think I probably would like to have had that. And that's the kind of thinking that went with Ansel Adams when he shot Moonrise at Hernandez. You got that same, you know, what does the moon look like? How bright is it? And then how bright is everything in relation to that exposure? So you really, exposure is a big deal. You need to really pay attention to that. It's not as hard as you might think, but it is something that you need to pay attention to. I like the lighthouse here, and you know, I certainly would not get rid of that. That makes that to me is the story. And then, of course, compositionally speaking, the two of them playing off each other works really, really well. Who did this? Oh, score 7.
Okay, can the artist speak up, please?
Yes, hi, this is Chris D'Amico. Appreciate your comments and your suggestions. I'll have to keep them in mind as I try and redo that. Thank you.
Sure enough. Yeah, and never stop working on an image. I have gone back and you know, looked at images that I've processed, and you know, going back in some cases a few years, and reopened the file and said, oh, you know what, I can make this better. So don't quit. Okay, this is one of my number 10s. I love this picture. I'm very familiar with the subject. I worked in the Capitol for a long time. And shortly after these 4 paintings were restored, I photographed them for Reader's Digest General Books in New York. So I'm very familiar with this scene, and the symmetry is important. And symmetry to me as an architectural photographer is very important. And I think this is extremely well done. Look at the way the curve on both sides is equal. You've got this dead center, and exposure wise, it's absolutely perfect. You've got only the brightest areas of these glass areas here are white. The rest has detail. This could very easily have been done badly, and this could go to white, and that wouldn't be good. So you've kept the detail where you should, and you've got highlights where you should. There's also reflected highlights on some of the marble from the windows, and that is also well done. And just the detail and the managing of having all of the shadow detail is extremely, extremely well done. So this just gets a lot of kudos and a score of 10. And I'll stop gushing and let the maker smile. Who did this?
Hi, Bryson. It's Elaine Shook. Thank you so much for your comments. Much better than I expected, actually. I did struggle with this one a little bit in getting the perspective perfect. But I worked very hard, probably 10, 15 minutes just setting the camera up physically to get it dead center and get the camera perfectly level. So I didn't have to do a lot of perspective corrections in Photoshop or Lightroom. But I had fun doing it. Overall, I'm pleased with what I got. There were a few things that didn't make me happy. I tend to be a perfectionist, and if you look very closely, the perspective is not perfect, but that's me, something I have to get over. But thank you again for your comments.
Well, that spending time to set it up is how it's done, and then spending time later in the processing to refine what you've worked to capture is the second half of getting it done. So congratulations, you did well. This is good. And that, like I said, that's a score of 10. Good for you. Next, number 4, birding on the edge. This is nice. I like this. I like the fact that we're not up to our ears in flying birds. This guy stands out by himself and makes himself known. And to my mind, he becomes the subject. So I think this is really well captured. That says to me a lot about when you see something like this and something really good is going on, you just keep taking pictures. And you find out later, after you edit your way through 25 or 30 or 40 shots, that one of them is going to stand out and say, you know, this just feels better than all the rest, and it's worth the effort. I think I would probably want to simplify. There's so much going on here. It's so busy that I would want to try to simplify it a little bit. I would do that with cropping. I would lose some on the edge here. I think this lighter colored rock on the edge doesn't need to be there. I think this dark colored rock is just handing you a gift. So this becomes to me the edge. So I would crop over to this edge. Then I would come up from the bottom and find this space in here to be a gift as well and come across there. And once you do that, it doesn't become a severely cropped image, but it becomes an image where these elements are reduced in size, particularly this one on the right. And it adds a little bit more emphasis to the flying bird. And I think it tells the story equally well, perhaps even better, just simply by that process of simplification. So, but even at that, it's just extremely well done. Good exposure. Whites are handled well. Contrast is good. The dark areas hold detail. So you've got a 9, which is a very, very good score. Who did this?
Sherry Hogue. And thank you, Bryson. I like your suggestion about cropping. I wasn't, well, whatever. I hadn't tried to crop it at all, but I will now because I think I like what you've suggested. So thank you.
Very good. Okay, number 5. This is another well-seen image, and kudos to the maker for the nicely done verticals. I appreciate verticals that are vertical. And I think the exposure here is dead on for the subject. Look at how the light plays in the highlights, and then even in the darkest shadows, there's some detail. So you really feel like everything is exactly the way you would expect it to be. It looks right. And that's the way you do it. You control the contrast, you expose for the highlights, you control the contrast and the other parts of your post-processing in order to manage the midtones and the shadows. That's the way digital photography works. And this is exposed well, and it is managed well. I think the only objection that I have, and believe me, it's not much of an objection, is this lighter corner down here. And I think I would probably want to take this down so that these values more closely resemble these other shadow values in order to not draw the eye to this corner unnecessarily. So I'd be very, very careful on that. And this is number 5, which has a score of 9. Very good.
That's mine. Terry, Bryson, thank you. Right after I shot this, it started to rain, so I got out of there quick. It's one of my favorite places to shoot.
It is good. Yeah, that's a nice, good job, Terry.
Thank you very much.
Number 6, the old red mill. Now here's where we're going to start getting a little bit deeper into this conversation about exposure and also about contrast and processing after you've got the image in the camera. One of the things you have to realize is that if you let the camera do the work for you, it's going to do some things well, and it's going to do a few things not really all that well. And one of the things that cameras have a tendency to do is underexpose your images. Cameras are designed not for professionals and advanced amateurs. It's designed for snap shooters, and it tries to preserve highlights. And the result of that is that you get anywhere from a half of stop to a stop of underexposure if you don't do anything to compensate for the way the camera is going to act. And I think that this is at least a stop underexposed. These highlight values could be brighter. Holding the information is interesting, but you can hold that a lot further up the scale than you think you can, especially with a raw file. A couple of things that I do with the camera is in your picture style. You want to lower the contrast and the sharpening in the picture styles options as far as you possibly can, because that's going to give you a better feedback on a JPEG processed by the camera as to what is in the raw file. A sharpened regular contrast image in a JPEG out of the camera can be a little confusing. I had one student a couple of years back who came back from vacation, and she's showing me her pictures, and I said, why so dark? Why are things so dark? And she said, and I said, do you have any brighter brackets? And she said, well, I had brighter brackets, but I thought they were too bright and I deleted them. And I think what she did was she spent her evenings after a day of shooting reviewing the images on the back of the camera, and what looked too bright to her on the back of the camera, she deleted, and they probably would have been much, much better raw files with more detail in the shadows and still maintain detail in the highlights, because all of her stuff was at least a stop underexposed. So keep that kind of thing in mind. The camera feedback you're getting on that JPEG is really kind of convincing you to keep your exposures a little bit darker, and that's not necessarily the best idea. So this to me is the colors are nice and rich, the composition is good, the picture is well seen, but the overall, the loss of detail and the shadows and everything indicates to me that we're looking at an underexposed image. If you processed it down like this, then I think you have a monitor issue. If the pictures look brighter than this to you, or if this looks good to you on your monitor and you're seeing detail in here, your monitor is too bright and you need to deal with that monitor profiling in order to alleviate that problem. Number 6, the old red mill gets a 6.
Can we hear from the artist?
Maybe not here.
Maybe not, unless he's muted.
Okay, now remember this, because I'm going to come back. I'm going to refer back to this image later. Okay.
Okay.
Number 7 is twists and turns. Well seen, well composed. The square works pretty well. I think this again has a tendency to look to me like it's a little underexposed. Some of these white values could be a little brighter, and especially the center of the flower could be brighter. This information I think would be important. I don't mind the outside being dark. In fact, I probably would put a vignette on it to drive the corners even down even further. So that isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what happens to all of the petals and then the center of the flower. This should have more information, visual information to it in order to brighten up and look at you. So I consider that this may have started also with an underexposed image. This is a 7, and the maker.
Bryson, that's my photo. You're right about the center. I didn't even think to do that when I was doing the processing. And there actually is a vignette around this. I was darker, then I made it lighter, then I made it darker again, and didn't know what I was doing. And I never thought about the whites, because what I did with it was a white flower, a perfectly white flower, and I dehazed it to give it the darkness. And I liked it better this way, but I should have brightened that inside, like you said. I never thought of that. And I never thought about the whites being overblown. So thanks for pointing them out, Bryson.
I know you argue with yourself, and that's perfectly okay.
True.
Okay, number 8. Wow, what a difference. Look at this. Boom. Now that your eyes have slammed shut, Snowbound at Bryce. When you have light that is totally flat, there's not a lot you can do to get detail, if you will, into things like snow. I understand the atmospherics here, but I think this is well done. I think it's well exposed, given what is going on. And I can tell that for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that here, where you do have a little bit of snow against the sky, you can see the difference. There's a graying of the snow here where the sky is pure white. And then down here, you can see the snow. There's a little bit of a shadow over here and some shadowing in here against the whiter snow. So that says to me that this is shot well and was exposed well and is also processed as well as it can be. Probably the big deal here is that you're handed a certain amount of problems with the light, and then what you have to say is, okay, this is the picture, this is the light, this is what it was. Do I make a good photograph out of that? And I would say, yes, you have. I'll give this an 8. And the maker is?
Hi, it's Zach Bergman. I appreciate the comments.
Very good, Jack. Nice picture. Now, let's go again here with exposure. Final glow, we have a whole different look here because now we have a mood. The exposure is appropriate to the mood, or the processing is appropriate to the mood, one of the two, because there's nothing here that necessarily should be pure white or bright white. So this is a different look than this. Okay, so the mood here dictates the way that things should happen, and that's a whole different thing. When you're processing something like this, I have a suggestion for you, and that is to take the contrast and lower it. And what will happen is you will see darker areas of the image start to brighten up. At the point where they get too bright or when they just barely begin to show, that's when you say, okay, I've gone far enough. People have a tendency to increase the contrast, expecting that they should be driving these dark areas into black. And I disagree with that philosophy completely. I think if you open your shadows up a little bit, you're going to find that there's a little bit of life in that image that you might appreciate, especially if you go to print. But it's as well done overall. And I think only just brought to mind making a few comments. The foreground information here against the pond, the reflections, etc. I like the composition. I like it all. It's all pretty well done. So that also gets an 8. Good shot, Maker. Anyone?
Yeah, Claire, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
There you go. It's
There
Claire. Thank you very much for your comments. I will work on the contrast and shadows some. I do see what you're saying in the shadows there, but thank you very much for your comments.
Very good. Nice picture. Worth the work.
Thank you.
Here again, we have the contrast. This is, I think this image with slightly different contrast processing could open up in the bottom end a little bit and be way better than it is, despite the fact that it's already extremely good. This is nicely seen. This is a very, very nice image, well captured. You've got a lot of brass instruments here that are shiny, so they're going to be picking up reflections. You've got a heck of a lot of contrast inherent in the picture with all the whites and then the darks, but it's not too bad because I can tell that these are red outfits, not black, so you haven't driven it into the bottom. But I think if you just either pull the shadows up a little bit or lower the contrast, you would have just a little bit more information in these red areas, and I think that would be a good thing. It's pretty well done, and I have no real issues with it. That's just kind of a, gee, I wonder if it would be a little better if I did this. And it got a score of 9, so that says it's a pretty good image. Who did it?
That's mine, Mary Eileen Carson.
Very nice, Mary Eileen.
Thank you. Thank you. I will try making those adjustments. Thank you for that.
You always have to play.
Yeah.
Very good. Number 11, Cascades. Okay. You've got 2 pictures here, to my mind. And I think what I would want to do is to simplify this greatly. And I would do that by just running a crop down this and throwing this whole right-hand side away. I think your image is right here. This is where all the life is. This is where it all happens. I'd like to see a little bit more on the left. I'd like to see a little bit more on the bottom, but I don't think I really need anything beyond some logical breaking point over here that would balance, the compositional setup that's going on here. I would darken. What's going to happen is these are going to end up in the right-hand corner down here. So I would want to darken these down. And that could be done pretty easily. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I also tend to want to tame greens. Yellowish greens are very common. And for some reason or other, they just strike me wrong. So my tendency in a photograph like this would be to tame those greens down, which is going to make them kind of melt into the background a little bit more, because the important stuff that's happening is all happening in the waterfalls as far as I'm concerned. So that's my rant on that, and that gets an 8.
Who's the
Who's it?
artist?
That's mine, Bryson, Norbert Fry. Actually, wait a minute, oh, wait a minute.
Norbert, you muted
You
yourself.
turn yourself off.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Actually, I have one exactly like you were describing, like I have it cut down the center and I have a long, and it's more this way. And I don't know, I just kind of like the two waterfalls. I don't know, I just kind of liked it that way. And, but I do have exactly what you're saying. I have one cut down right down the center, and it's got more on the left-hand side coming down that one side. And yeah, and I shot early in the morning. That's up in Holly, Pennsylvania. It's up at the there's a hotel that's right on the waterfalls up there, and it's pretty cool. And
Where is
yeah,
it again?
it's in Holly, Hawley, Holly, Pennsylvania.
okay,
It's up in
Hawley,
the
yeah.
Poconos,
I've heard of that. Yeah.
and it's a hotel, and it's situated right on the falls. When you walk out in the morning, right there it is.
There you go.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
it's easy.
yeah.
I'm
All
at
right,
the
thanks.
age, I'm at the age where the closer it is to the parking lot, the more inclined I am to photograph it. So
That's the way I feel about it, Bryce. The same thing.
very nice. Well, don't talk yourself out of a good picture.
No, thanks, Bryson.
Very good. Number 12, getting ready for spring. This is a great capture. The subject matter, of course, is wonderful, and the positioning. There's just a whole lot of really good stuff going on here. I would like to see if you actually had more in camera than this, because I'd like to have a little room on the left. I can live with the bottom, but I would like to see this line be horizontal. I'm convinced that it is horizontal, and I think because I see a lot of things going on here that say to me that this is kind of tilted, and you're tilting it to favor the subject, but I think you're not really favoring the subject. You're kind of rocking the picture to an angle, and that's something that I don't think is necessary. I think if you do that, you'll find that it will sit perfectly fine in the frame. And if you have a little bit more space, I'd put some on the left. You could crop a little bit off the right. I wouldn't take too much off, but I think the left addition would be more important than what's going on the right-hand side. That and leveling it off. So this gets a 7. And who did this?
This is Diane. That was over in Hershey. And I don't know if I have more or not, but I'll try to, I see what you're saying about leveling it out. I didn't see that before.
Yeah, you shot in Hershey.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
I don't know if Bruce Stank is online tonight, but he has one almost identical. He wasn't with us, but he must have been following close behind because he's got one almost exactly like it. But yeah, that's in Hershey.
It's a good C. It's a very good C. I appreciate what you're seeing. I just think maybe you need to work on it a little bit.
I see that. I always learn something from you. Sometimes I have to learn it over and over and over again.
Oh, well, don't we all? Yeah. I didn't get here in the first 2 weeks.
Thank you for your comments.
Very, very good. Okay, this is my second number 10. This is number 13, Waxed Wings. And this is just beautifully done. I like where the bird sits. I love the depth of field using the out of focus bokeh in the background. This is just delightful, nice and sharp, got a nice highlight in the eye. Exposure is good. You've got shadow detail in the dark areas. Absolutely, really, really wonderful photograph. I would, because I am slightly crazy, I would probably blow this up a lot in Photoshop, and I would work at just kind of removing a little bit right around the top edge of the head. Maybe this, maybe a little bit in here, and possibly this in order to just make this a 10.5. You know what I mean? Because it's really that good. And I think if this were, if I would, this is maybe, but this is definitely, I think I would just clean that up a little bit so that he just sits there perfectly exposed to you. And I think that's the only thing I would do to make it just a touch better than it already is. And it's really great. That's a 10. Who did that? Who's the bird
Hi,
guy?
this is Tom Stoddard. I appreciate your comments, and I'm going to give that a try and see how it looks.
Very good. It's worth the work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Before the Bloom, number 14. I love black and white. I do a lot of black and white work myself. If you go to my website, you'll see I've got whole galleries, just nothing but black and white images. So I understand black and white. I started as a black and white photographer back when we had film that you actually could only shoot in black and white. See how old I am? I like this. I wonder why you seem compelled to make a square out of this. You know, sometimes you go, gee, I think I'll do this, or I think I'll do that. My efforts when it comes to aspect ratios go, okay, I take the crop tool and I say, I want it to start here and end here and start here and end here. And I don't really care if that's a square or a 4x6 or a 5x7 or an 11x14. I don't care what the aspect ratio is. I care how the subject sits within the frame and what the extra space does or doesn't do to support that. So I think that the extra top in particular doesn't help it. And I wonder why you made the stem disappear. I think that just the slightest hint of support on the bottom of this would make me really, really happy. So I would like to see that stem go down there, and that would justify keeping a lot of the bottom as well. It's not like horribly done or anything. It's just a suggestion on something I think that might make it a little bit better. So this will get a 7, and it's by who?
If you're
Nobody.
muted, you may need to unmute yourself or press the space bar.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, this is Mark Filbano. It's just mine. That's the recropping is a good idea. The reason the stem is missing is because there was a big leaf in front of it. I couldn't
Big
get
what?
much more of the stem than what I have there. This was done outside. This was not done staged or anything.
Oh, okay. All right.
So the whole lower section, I could probably lose some of the bottom part of it too. But I thought it was going to be way too much work to try to build the stem back in.
Too much work. Spoken
Yeah,
like
too
a
much
man
work.
who's-
I'm lazy.
Spoken like a man who's never spent 3 days working on an image.
You're right.
Okay.
But
All
thanks for
right.
your input. I appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Number 15. Another black and white, also pretty well done. And I like the shapes, I like the composition, I like the concept, I like the idea. I think the darks are a little overdone. I think the blacks are too black. And the reason for that is that I get edges they're just going away. They're disappearing. I'd like to see the shapes held better. And the contrast might be the way to do that. But another suggestion from a guy who shot a lot of tabletop photography is that just the slightest hint of a glow back here would also serve to separate that, but it also helps to enhance the three-dimensional effect of the foreground to background. So I think I probably would have put another light back here, very subtle. You could even, if you absolutely had to, create that light in Photoshop if you're a Photoshop worker. Probably not in Lightroom so much. Excuse me. But I think that would separate this and make it just a little bit more three-dimensional. So that gets a 7, and it is.
Hey, Bryson, Dave Marquetto. Thanks very much for the comments. I had the biggest challenge here, I think, in going from color, which was really nice. The vase was greenish, and it went really nice with the the green and the flower. But I decided to go to black and white. So that's where I spent a fair amount of time, and I really thank you for those suggestions.
If you're working in Lightroom, you've got the hue and saturation and brightness panel to work with there. And when you're making changes to black and white, you can control the green, the way that the green is rendered in terms of its density. And that might be something you might want to play with. You can even change the hue and make it an absolutely different color, which when you translate it to black and white is irrelevant, but it might make it easier to make certain parts of that show up. Some of my black and whites, if you turn off the black and white layer creation at the top of the stack, the colors in the image don't look anything like reality or the way it started. They're done in order to make the black and white conversion work. So, all bets are off when it comes to that kind of thing. You can play all you want and do it until it looks good. So keep playing. All right.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I appreciate it, Bryson.
Sure enough. And our last image of the evening, number 16. I like this. This is neat. And it's especially neat because this kind of photograph is pretty hard to do. This moving birds, race cars, anything where you've got to pan along with the subject requires not only a certain amount of expertise, but a bucket load of luck to go along with it, because you can just shoot and shoot and shoot and then discover that nothing worked. But if you work things to your advantage and then you end up with a photograph that's pretty neat, why, that just makes it all the better. Is the zebra perfect? No. Good enough, I would say, to get the point across. With all of this linearity going on, I would be really seriously tempted to crop this bright area off the top and take a little bit off the bottom here too and darken it and really enhance that feeling of motion by making this a more of a skinny image, if you will. I think that would work to your advantage, but this is pretty well captured. It's interestingly seen too, from the standpoint that these guys are obviously not zebras. So there's something really kind of interesting going on. I think they're moving faster than he is. I think that's the whole point. So he's trying to keep up. Nicely seen, nicely shot, and pretty well done. I'll give this a 7, and thank you. Who did this?
This is mine, Joe Farrell. Thank you very much for that, for the comments of skinning it up. This was in Africa, and we were in a Jeep, and so I had to keep the zebra at my 45 and let the wildebeest go. Like you said, they were going faster to get that overall impression. And so, yes, thank you very much for your comments. Really appreciate it.
Very good, Joe. Very good. Okay, I think we've done what we're supposed to do. I'll turn it back over to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Rick, you have the top scores?
Yes, the 2 10s are number 3, which was the Capital Splendor by Elaine Shook.
Okay.
And then number 13, Waxed Wings by Thomas Studdard.
Okay, great. Let's everybody unmute themselves and give a nice big round of applause for the winners for this. That would be great.
Very good.
Very nice.
There you go.
Nicely done.
And we want to thank Bryson for doing the competition tonight. That was very good and succinct reviews. We really appreciate that. It was very good. Thank you. We all learned something from that. So on Saturday, we have Anderson Mill. And if you have any questions about that, whether it's appropriate for you, which it is because it's easy, just email me. And then next Monday night, we have Jürgen Lebay, who is going to be doing urban night photography. And that will be applicable to any city or town that you're in to do night photography. And you don't have to fly to Norway to get the Northern Lights for that. So thank you very much. And it'll be recorded. You get that in the morning email. Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bryson.
Good night.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bryson's still on? No, he's not. Very good. Okay, good. We'll see you guys. See you on Saturday, maybe. Bye now.